The crisp click of a luxury briefcase locking is a sound of finality. For Ryan Mitchell, one of the sharpest corporate lawyers in the country, it was the sound of preparation for a legal battle that would save an airline $50 million. He was their silver bullet flying first class to their rescue, but he never made it to his seat. At the boarding gate in front of everyone, his VIP status was questioned, his integrity was challenged, and his dignity was stripped away by an employee with a cheap uniform and an expensive prejudice. They didn't know they weren't just disrespecting a passenger. They were firing the one man who could save them. This is the story of how a single whispered accusation at Gate C-27 didn't just delay a flight, it bankrupted a legacy. Ryan Mitchell believed in armor. Not the medieval kind, but its modern equivalent. His suit was a custom-tailored Tom Ford, the dark charcoal wool, a silent testament to a six-figure salary and countless billable hours. His watch, a Patek Philippe Calatrava, was a subtle nod to precision and tradition, a gift to himself after winning his first nine-figure case. His briefcase was a handcrafted leather vessel from Swain Adini Brigg, and inside its contents were even more formidable, meticulously organized documents, depositions and precedents that formed the legal fortress for his client, Orajet Airlines. Ryan was a partner at Sterling Spector and Ross, a law firm whose name was whispered with a mixture of awe and terror in boardrooms across America. He wasn't just a lawyer, he was a corporate surgeon. When a company was bleeding from a catastrophic lawsuit, they called him to stop the hemorrhaging. And Orajet was bleeding badly. The case was Innovate Corp. Vive Orajet Airlines. A disastrous software glitch in Orajet's new booking system had led to a cascade of failures, double-booking thousands of passengers and grounding a significant portion of their fleet for 72 critical hours during the peak holiday season. Innovate Corp., the software developer, claimed Orajet had implemented the system improperly, despite numerous warnings. Orajet claimed Innovate Corp. Had sold them a fundamentally broken product. The damages sought were a staggering $50 million, a figure that would cripple Orajet's Q4 earnings and send its stock price into a tailspin. Ryan had spent the last 4 months living inside this case. He'd found the smoking gun a series of buried emails from a disgruntled mid-level programmer at Innovate Corp., warning his superiors of the exact catastrophic failure that eventually occurred. It was a golden ticket, a get-out-of-jail-free card for Orajet. The deposition of this programmer was scheduled for 10:00 a.m. tomorrow in San Francisco. Ryan's presence was non-negotiable. He was flying from JFK to SFO, where Orajet's CEO Liam Harrison and their general counsel Jessica Riley would be waiting. They were flying on the same plane a few rows behind him in the Orajet Sky Suite first-class cabin. His journey to the airport was seamless, a ballet of choreographed privilege. A black car service, the respectful nod of the curbside check-in attendant who recognized his name, the swift, frictionless passage through TSA pre-check. He arrived at the Orajet flagship lounge, a hushed sanctuary of muted lighting, expensive whiskey, and the low murmur of important conversations. He ordered a Macallan 18 neat and reviewed his opening statement one last time, the words on the page already seared into his memory. He was calm, prepared, invincible in his polished armor. An hour later, the boarding announcement for Flight 217 to San Francisco echoed softly through the lounge. We now invite our Orajet concierge key and Sky Suite first-class passengers to board at Gate C-27. Ryan packed his briefcase, slipped his phone into his pocket, and took a final sip of whiskey. He walked with an unhurried confidence toward the gate. The line was already divided. To the left, a long meandering queue for the main cabin. To the right, a short exclusive carpeted lane for Group 1. Ryan joined the 3 other passengers waiting there. The gate agent at the podium was a woman in her late 40s, named Sarah Jenkins. She had a taut, weary face and hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch the skin around her eyes. She scanned the first passenger's ticket with a practiced flick of her wrist. "Enjoy your flight, Mr. Abernathy." Next was a young couple buzzing with honeymoon energy. "Enjoy your flight?" Then it was Ryan's turn. He stepped forward and held out his phone, the boarding pass, glowing on its screen. Sarah Jenkins didn't look at the screen. Her eyes flickered from Ryan's face to his expensive suit, to his watch, and back to his face. It was a scan, but not a professional one. It was an appraisal laced with something sour and suspicious. "Boarding pass," she said, her voice flat. "It's right here," Ryan replied, keeping his tone even. He held the phone closer. She ignored it. "Let me see your ID." It was an unusual request during boarding, especially for the priority lane, but Ryan complied without comment. He pulled out his wallet and produced his driver's license. She took it and held it up, comparing the photo to his face. She squinted. "Ryan Mitchell." She said the name, as if it were an object she'd found on the floor. "That's me," he said, a flicker of annoyance beginning to pierce his composure. She handed the license back and finally glanced at his phone. "This says Sky Suite First Class." "Correct." Her eyes narrowed. Sometimes people get screenshots of boarding passes, or they get upgrades that are later revoked by the system. "I just need to verify your seat." The accusation, though veiled, was clear. He didn't belong here. He must have gotten this ticket through some illicit means. The other passengers in the main cabin line were starting to stare. Ryan could feel the heat of their collective gaze. His polished armor was being scuffed. "I can assure you my seat is verified," Ryan said, his voice dropping a full octave, becoming the firm, commanding tone he used in court. "My ticket was booked by my firm weeks ago. Please scan the pass." Sarah seemed to take his confidence as a challenge. Instead of scanning the pass, she turned to her computer terminal and began typing, her fingers pecking at the keys with deliberate slowness. "I'm just not seeing it update properly here, sir. There can be glitches." The irony was not lost on Ryan. A glitch. "There is no glitch." He said the words, now clipped and cold. "You are creating a delay for no reason. Scan the pass or call your supervisor." This was a mistake. He had given her an escalation path and she took it with relish. "Oh, I'll be happy to call my manager. We take cabin security very seriously at Orajet." She picked up the phone, her voice now carrying a note of theatrical urgency. "Mark, I have a situation at C-27. A passenger with a questionable boarding pass for first class." A situation. A questionable passenger. The language was deliberate, designed to paint him as a threat, a fraud. The humiliation was a physical sensation, now a hot flush creeping up his neck. In minutes, a man named Mark Thompson arrived. He was short, officious, with a paunch that strained the buttons of his ill-fitting manager's uniform. He didn't make eye contact with Ryan, speaking only to Sarah. "What's the problem?" "This passenger's pass for 2A isn't verifying in my system. He seems agitated," she said, adding the last part with a pointed look at Ryan. Mark Thompson finally turned to Ryan. "Sir, we're going to have to ask you to step aside. We need to figure out what's going on with your ticket. We can't hold up the boarding process for everyone else." "You're not holding it up. She is," Ryan said, gesturing with his chin toward Sarah. "My ticket is valid. My name is Ryan Mitchell. I am a concierge key member. My ticket was purchased for me by the law firm Sterling, Spector and Ross to represent your own company Orajet in a multi-million-dollar lawsuit. The CEO of your airline, Liam Harrison, is getting on this very plane. Would you like me to call him and have him vouch for me?" He thought the name-dropping would end this farce. He was wrong. It only emboldened them. To Mark and Sarah, it sounded like the desperate bluff of a man caught in a lie. Mark Thompson smirked a cruel, knowing little expression. "So everyone's a friend of the CEO when there's a problem. Please, step aside now, or I'll have to call airport security." The threat hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Airport security. The final, irreversible step of humiliation. Being escorted out of a priority line like a common criminal. All the eyes on him, the whispers, the judgments. His Tom Ford suit, his Patek Philippe, his entire suit of armor. It had all been rendered useless by a gate agent's suspicion and a manager's petty tyranny. He looked past them through the jet bridge window at the sleek, powerful aircraft he was meant to be on. The aircraft carrying the executives he was supposed to save. With a calmness that surprised even himself, Ryan Mitchell took a single step back from the podium. He nodded slowly. "You're right," he said, his voice devoid of all emotion. "There's no need for that." He turned away from the gate, from the plane, from the case. He walked not to the side, but back toward the main terminal, his footsteps echoing in the sudden, confused silence. He didn't look back. The armor was gone, but underneath something much harder was taking its place: resolve. The walk back from gate C-27 was the longest of Ryan Mitchell's life. The ambient noise of the terminal, the rolling suitcases, the cheerful PA announcements, the distant laughter seemed to mock the silent volcanic fury erupting within him. Every curious glance from a passerby felt like a fresh indictment. He saw his reflection in the polished marble floor, a man in a perfect suit carrying a perfect briefcase, his face a mask of cold composure. But inside, he was unraveling. It wasn't just anger. It was a profound, soul-deep humiliation that stripped away years of hard-won respect in a matter of minutes. He hadn't just been delayed. He'd been judged, profiled, and dismissed. The implicit accusation was as clear as if it had been stamped on his forehead in red ink. "You do not belong here." He thought of his father, a chemical engineer who immigrated with $200 and an unshakable belief in the American meritocracy. He'd always told Ryan, "You must be twice as good, twice as prepared to get half the recognition. Build yourself an armor of excellence, so thick they cannot deny you." Ryan had lived by that creed. He'd graduated top of his class at Harvard Law, made partner at a top-tier firm before he was 35, and cultivated a reputation for being unassailable. He had built the thickest armor imaginable, and two petty tyrants at a boarding gate had just pierced it with a single dirty look. He found an empty seat in a deserted corner of the terminal overlooking the tarmac. He watched as Flight 217, his flight, completed its boarding. The jet bridge retracted with a hydraulic hiss. The ground crew scurried away. The aircraft, a massive Boeing 777 with the elegant Aurajet Swan logo on its tail, began its slow, powerful pushback. On board that plane were Liam Harrison and Jessica Riley, the two most powerful people at the airline, blissfully unaware that their legal salvation was now sitting in Terminal C, watching them taxi toward a runway and a disaster. His phone buzzed. It was Elizabeth Warren, the senior managing partner at the firm. A living legend in legal circles, she was Ryan's mentor. He let it go to voicemail. He needed a moment to think, to recalibrate. He pulled out his laptop and connected to the airport Wi-Fi. His mind, trained to cut through emotion and analyze facts, began to work. Fact 1. He had been publicly humiliated by employees of his own client. Fact 2. This humiliation was based on, at best, gross incompetence, and at worst, naked racial prejudice. Fact 3. The client's representatives, who were feet away on the same aircraft, were inaccessible. Fact 4. His presence in San Francisco tomorrow morning was until 10 minutes ago deemed mission critical to saving said client from a $50 million judgment. He thought about the options. He could book the next flight. He'd arrive late tonight, tired and furious, but he could still make the deposition. He could swallow his pride, compartmentalize the rage, and do the job he was paid handsomely to do. That was the professional choice, the choice his father would have advised. Be better than them. Don't let them drag you down. But then a new thought, cold and sharp as a shard of ice, entered his mind. What was the job? The job was to defend EurAjet Airlines, to stand before a judge and argue on behalf of their corporate integrity, their reputation, their commitment to excellence. How could he do that? How could he, with a straight face, champion a company that had just treated him like a piece of garbage? Every argument he made in their defense would feel like a lie, a betrayal of his own experience. The core of his legal strategy in the Innovate Corp. Case was to portray EurAjet as a meticulous, detail-oriented company that had been victimized by a reckless vendor. He was going to paint them as a paragon of operational competence. And here he was, victimized by their own operational incompetence, their own systemic failure to train their employees to see a black man in a fine suit as anything other than a threat. He leaned back, the leather of the airport chair creaking. The anger was solidifying into a decision. It was a terrifying, career-altering decision, but it felt right. It felt like the only authentic choice he could make. His phone buzzed again. Elizabeth Warren. This time he answered. Ryan, what in God's name is going on? I just got a frantic alert from the corporate travel agency that your ticket for Flight 217 was cancelled. Liam Harrison's assistant called them in a panic. Did you miss the flight? Ryan took a deep breath. No, Elizabeth. I didn't miss it. I was denied boarding. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. Elizabeth Warren was not a woman easily stunned. Denied boarding. On what grounds? A double booking. On the grounds that the gate agent and her manager decided I looked suspicious. Ryan said, his voice steady. They refused to scan my boarding pass, accused me of holding a fraudulent ticket, and threatened to call security when I insisted they verify my status. He could hear her sharp intake of breath. They did what? You heard me. Ryan, I am so sorry. This is outrageous, unacceptable. We'll have their jobs. I'll call Liam Harrison personally when he lands. We'll file a formal complaint of the highest order. But for now, you need to get on the next flight to SFO. We can't let this derail the deposition. There it was, the practical, logical path forward. But Ryan's feet were now firmly planted on a different path. No, he said. No, what do you mean, no? I mean, I am not getting on the next flight. I am not going to San Francisco, and I am not representing EurAjet Airlines in this deposition tomorrow. The silence on the line was now so profound, he could hear the faint static of the connection. Ryan, think very carefully about what you are saying, Elizabeth said, her voice low and dangerous. This is a cornerstone client. This isn't just about this one case. It's about a $20 million a year relationship. I am thinking carefully, Ryan replied. I am thinking about what it means to stand up in a court of law and advocate for a client. It requires a fundamental belief in their position, or at the very least, a professional respect for the entity you represent. I no longer have that. How can I argue that EurAjet is a competent, fair, and respectable corporation when their own frontline employees treated me with such flagrant disrespect and prejudice? My credibility as their advocate has been compromised because I no longer believe what I would be selling. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. Furthermore, my presence is now a liability. What happens when Innovate Corp's lawyers hear about this? And they will. They'll use it. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Aurajet's lawyer is going to talk to you about competence and attention to detail. Yet on the very day he was flying here for this case, Aurajet's own staff couldn't even competently verify his first-class ticket and treated him like a criminal. It guts our entire position. Elizabeth was silent for a long moment. He could picture her in her corner office overlooking Central Park, pinching the bridge of her nose. She was a fighter, but she was also a pragmatist. She knew he was right. The argument was airtight. "What do you want to do?" she finally asked. "I am officially recusing myself from the case due to an irreconcilable conflict of interest with the client," Ryan stated the legal terminology, flowing as naturally as breath. "And I am advising the firm to terminate its relationship with Aurajet Airlines, effective immediately. We can no longer ethically represent them." "God, Ryan," she whispered. "This will be an earthquake." "Let the ground shake," Ryan said. He looked out the window. Flight 217 was now just a silver glint in the sky, climbing toward the sun. "Send the termination letter. Cite professional ethics and a fundamental breakdown of client-counsel trust. I'll draft it." As he hung up the phone, a strange sense of calm washed over him. He had just detonated a bomb in the middle of his career, torched a massive client relationship, and likely cost the firm millions. His armor wasn't just scuffed, it was gone voluntarily shed, and in its place was something far more powerful, himself, just Ryan Mitchell, and for the first time that day, he felt truly invincible. Aboard Aurajet Flight 217, Liam Harrison, CEO of Aurajet Airlines, was enjoying a glass of champagne. It wasn't just any champagne, it was a vintage Dom Perignon that his airline served exclusively in its Sky Suite first-class cabin. The soft fizz was a taste of victory. In his mind, the Innovate Corporator lawsuit was already won. Ryan Mitchell was his ace in the hole, a legal assassin who never missed. The $50 million problem was about to be reduced to a footnote in their quarterly report. Next to him, Jessica Riley, the sharp, impeccably dressed general counsel, was reviewing her notes on a tablet. "Mitchell's preliminary brief is a work of art," she said, not looking up. "He's not just going for a dismissal. He's laying the groundwork for a countersuit for reputational damages. The man is a shark. That's why we pay Sterling, Spector, and Ross those obscene hourly rates," Liam chuckled, swirling his champagne. "Worth every penny." He stretched his legs, enjoying the ludicrous amount of space his seat afforded him. The flight was smooth, the cabin was quiet, and the future looked bright. The first sign of trouble came via the plane's satellite Wi-Fi, a service for which Aurajet charged a premium. An email with a high-importance flag popped up on Jessica's tablet. The subject line was a single ominous word, urgent. It was from her deputy counsel. She opened it, her brow furrowing slightly as she read. Her expression shifted from professional focus to confusion and then to stark disbelief. "Liam," she said, her voice suddenly tight. He grunted, distracted by the in-flight movie menu. "Liam, look at this." She angled her screen toward him. He squinted at the email. "Subject urgent, Jessica. Getting frantic calls from Elizabeth Warren's office at SS&R. Something happened at JFK. Ryan Mitchell was not on the flight. His ticket was cancelled at the gate. They are being cryptic, but mentioned a client-counsel trust issue. Repeat, Mitchell is not on the plane and is not en route to SFO. I need guidance immediately." Liam read it twice. He blinked, as if the words were a foreign language he couldn't quite pass. Not on the plane. What does that mean? Did he have a medical emergency? Car accident? The possibilities ran through his mind, all of them, logistical, impersonal. A client-counsel trust issue doesn't sound like a car accident, Jessica said, her legal mind already racing ahead to the catastrophic implications. That's language lawyers use for a fundamental breakdown. Something very bad happened at that gate. Liam waved a dismissive hand. It's a misunderstanding, a ticketing screw-up. Get Mitchell on the phone. Jessica was already dialing her phone connected to the Wi-Fi calling service. It rang, and then went to voicemail. Straight to voicemail. She then dialed Elizabeth Warren's direct line. This time it was answered on the first ring. Elizabeth, it's Jessica Riley. We're in the air. What the hell is going on? Where is Ryan? Elizabeth's voice on the other end was glacial. Mr. Mitchell is in New York, Miss Riley. He was detained at the boarding gate by your employees. Liam, who was leaning in to hear, scoffed. Detained? That's ridiculous. For what? For the crime, it seems, of being a black man with a first-class ticket. Elizabeth said the words landing with the force of a physical blow. He was accused of holding a fraudulent pass, condescended to and threatened with airport security by your gate manager. He was publicly humiliated. Jessica's face went pale. Liam's jaw tightened. That's a very serious accusation. It is a very serious reality, Elizabeth countered. As a result, Mr. Mitchell has recused himself from your case, citing an irreconcilable conflict of interest. He cannot, in good conscience, advocate for a company that has treated him in such a manner. I support his decision completely. The finality in her tone was chilling. This wasn't a negotiation. Hold on, Liam interjected his voice, rising. You can't just quit the night before a pivotal deposition. We have a contract. We have a $50 million lawsuit on the line. You had a $50 million lawsuit on the line, Mr. Harrison, Elizabeth corrected him. What you have now is a much bigger problem. And as of 15 p.m. Eastern Time, Sterling, Spector and Ross no longer represents Aurajet Airlines. You will find a formal termination of services letter in your inbox. We will, of course, cooperate in the transition of all case files to your new counsel, whomever that may be. Good day. The line went dead. For a full minute, Liam and Jessica sat in stunned silence. The gentle hum of the Rolls-Royce engines was the only sound. The champagne in Liam's glass had lost its appeal. New counsel, Jessica whispered, the colour drained from her face. The deposition is in less than 24 hours. No lawyer on earth could get up to speed in time. We'd have to ask for a continuance. And the judge will ask why. Liam growled, his face turning a blotchy red. What do we say? Our lawyer quit because our gate agent was an idiot. Innovate Corp's counsel will have a field day. They'll paint us as a chaotic, unprofessional mess. The judge will be prejudiced against us before we even start. The full weight of the situation crashed down on him. Ryan Mitchell wasn't just their lawyer, he was their entire strategy. He was the one who knew the thousands of pages of discovery inside and out. He was the one who had built the case brick by brick. Without him, they had nothing but a disorganized pile of documents and a massive legal bill. Liam's corporate mind, trained for damage control, kicked into gear. Okay, this is an HR issue, a rogue employee. We'll fire them. We'll fire the manager. We'll issue a public apology to Ryan. I'll call him myself man to man and smooth this over. We'll throw money at him. A bonus, a donation to his favorite charity, whatever it takes. Get him back. Jessica shook her head slowly. Liam, you're not understanding. You heard Elizabeth. This isn't about money. This wasn't a business transaction for him. It was personal. You can't buy back a man's dignity with a wire transfer. We didn't just lose a lawyer. We created an enemy. A very, very smart enemy. Liam Harrison stared out the window at the endless expanse of white clouds below. He felt a sense of vertigo, as if the floor of the plane had just dropped out from under him. They were flying at 30,000 feet, safe and secure in a bubble of luxury, while on the ground, the empire he commanded was beginning to crumble, all because of a situation at Gate C-27. The $50 million lawsuit suddenly seemed like a secondary concern. The real crisis was just beginning to unfold. The moment Aurajet Flight 217 touched down at SFO, the carefully curated world of Liam Harrison and Jessica Riley shattered, their phones switching from airplane mode to the cellular network exploded with a deluge of notifications. Voicemails, emails flagged with red exclamation points, and a cascade of frantic text messages. The formal termination letter from Sterling, Spector, and Ross was at the top of the pile. It was a masterpiece of cold, professional fury. It cited a fundamental and irreparable breach of the client-counsel relationship stemming from an incident of discriminatory conduct by Aurajet employees, and invoked an ethics clause in their engagement agreement that allowed for immediate withdrawal. Worse, the news was already leaking. A junior associate at SS&R, loyal to Ryan, had anonymously tipped off a reporter at the Wall Street Journal. By the time Liam's car was speeding towards Aurajet's corporate offices, a headline was already breaking on the wires. Top law firm dumps Auranet Airlines on eve of major lawsuit. The article was brutal. It didn't have all the details, but it had enough. It spoke of a serious incident involving Aurajet personnel and a prominent partner at the firm, leading to the abrupt termination of a multi-decade relationship. The timing just before the Innovate Corpidor deposition was highlighted as highly unusual and indicative of a severe internal crisis at the airline. The financial markets, which despise uncertainty and smell blood in the water, reacted instantly. In after hours, trading Aurajet's stock ticker AURJ began to plummet. Analysts who just yesterday had been predicting a strong quarter based on a likely legal victory were now downgrading the stock to sell, citing unforeseen legal and reputational risks. Meanwhile, in another part of San Francisco, a different kind of drama was unfolding. Isabella Rossi, lead counsel for Innovate Corp, was preparing for the next day's deposition when her phone buzzed. She was a notoriously sharp and relentless litigator, known for her ability to exploit any weakness in her opponents. The link to the Wall Street Journal article was sent to her by a colleague with the simple message. Isabella read the article, and a slow, predatory smile spread across her face. This wasn't just a crack in Aurajet's armor, it was a gaping wound. She immediately convened a late-night conference call with her legal team. "They have no counsel," she said, her voice electric with opportunity. "They will have to petition the court for a continuance, a delay. We will vigorously oppose it. We will argue that their legal troubles are self-inflicted, a result of their own operational chaos, which coincidentally is the very heart of our lawsuit against them." Her strategy was brilliant and vicious. She wasn't just going to let them delay. She was going to use their request for a delay as evidence against them. The next morning, as expected, Aurajet's hastily hired local counsel, a bewildered-looking lawyer named Arthur Finch, who had been pulled in at midnight, stood before Judge Eleanor Vance and stammered through a request for a 90-day continuance. "Your Honor, due to unforeseen circumstances resulting in a change of representation, we require additional time to prepare." Isabella Rossi rose calm and poised. "Your Honor, Innovate Corp objects. The unforeseen circumstances appear to be a crisis of Aurajet's own making. Their inability to manage their own legal team is directly analogous to their inability to manage the critical software systems at the heart of this case. It speaks to a pattern of corporate negligence. To grant a continuance would be to reward this dysfunction. we are prepared to proceed. If they are not, we move for summary judgment in our favor." It was a kill shot. Asking for summary judgment, an immediate ruling without a full trial, was audacious, but in this context, it was devastatingly effective. Judge Vance, a no-nonsense judge, known for her impatience with corporate shenanigans, looked down at Arthur Finch over the rim of her glasses. "Mr. Finch, your client's house appears to be in a state of disarray. Can you give me one good reason why I shouldn't entertain Ms. Rossi's motion?" Finch had no good reason. He was a deer in the headlights. The hearing was a bloodbath. The judge didn't grant the summary judgment, but she did something almost as bad. She granted a continuance of only 1 week. "Get your house in order. Mr. Finch," she'd ordered, her voice like gravel. "1 week, or I will be listening to Ms. Rossi's motion with great interest." The news sent another shock wave through Aurajet. 1 week was impossible. No top-tier lawyer would take on a case this complex with only 7 days to prepare. They were cornered. Liam Harrison sat in his boardroom, the stock ticker on the giant screen behind him, a waterfall of red. The stock was down 18%. Billions in shareholder value had been vaporized in less than a day. His phone was ringing incessantly with calls from furious board members. Jessica Riley walked in her face, grim. "Innovate Corp reached out," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "They know we're crippled. They've rescinded their previous settlement offer of $20 million. Liam looked up, his eyes bloodshot. "So what do they want now?" "They're offering us a new deal," Jessica said, taking a deep breath. "We can settle right now today and make this all go away." "For how much?" Liam asked, a glimmer of desperate hope in his eyes. Jessica slid a single sheet of paper across the vast mahogany table. Liam looked down at the number. It was so large he thought it was a typo. 125,000 sols. It wasn't just a settlement. It was an execution. $125 million. $75 million more than the original lawsuit, and $105 million more than the settlement they had been on the cusp of rejecting. All because of one man they had refused to let board a plane. The dominoes were not just falling, they were crashing down with breathtaking speed and force. The fallout was no longer just a legal and financial problem, it was a full-blown public relations catastrophe. The story had gone viral. Aurajet's $125 million mistake was the headline on every major news outlet. The anonymous tip had been fleshed out, and while Ryan Mitchell himself remained silent, refusing all comment sources close to the situation, had painted a damning picture. The narrative was set. A multi-billion-dollar airline had been brought to its knees by the petty bigotry of its own staff. The Aurajet board of directors convened an emergency meeting. The atmosphere was funereal. Liam Harrison, who just 48 hours earlier had been the confident king of his domain, now looked like a man on trial for his life. And in many ways, he was. "This is a 5-alarm fire, Liam," said Robert Vance, the lead independent director, a stern man with a reputation for corporate governance. "We didn't just lose a lawsuit, we've lost the public's trust. The brand is toxic overnight. What are you doing about it?" "We're launching a full internal investigation," Liam said, reading from a prepared statement. "We're committed to understanding what happened and ensuring it never happens again." "Forget the investigation for a moment." Another board member, Maria Flores, cut in. "What are you doing about the people responsible, the gate agent and the manager? Are they still employed?" "Their security credentials have been suspended, pending the investigation," Jessica Riley answered carefully. "Suspended. They should have been fired before your plane touched down in California," Vance thundered. Every minute they remain on the payroll is another signal that we don't take this seriously. The investigation itself was a pathetic exercise in buck passing. Sarah Jenkins, the gate agent, was interviewed first. She was defensive and tearful. "I was just following procedure," she claimed, clutching a tissue. His pass wasn't scanning right, and the system can be glitchy. He got so aggressive. I felt threatened. I was just trying to keep the flight secure. She painted herself as the victim, a diligent employee facing an intimidating passenger. Mark Thompson, the manager, took a different tack. He tried to project an air of authority that now seemed comical. "In a post-9/11 world, you can't be too careful," he said, puffing out his chest. "We have protocols." The passenger was confrontational and unwilling to cooperate. I made a judgment call to de-escalate by asking him to step aside. It's my job to prioritize the timely departure of the aircraft for the other 300 passengers. He framed his actions not as prejudice, but as professional duty. But their stories fell apart under the slightest scrutiny. The IT department confirmed there were no glitches with the scanners at Gate C27 at the time of the incident. Flight records showed that Ryan Mitchell's ticket and concierge key status were perfectly valid and had been confirmed multiple times. And worst of all, security camera footage without audio showed the interaction clearly. It didn't show an aggressive passenger. It showed a calm man in a suit, standing patiently, then being spoken to by 2 employees, and then turning and walking away. It was their body language, Sarah's dismissive wave, Mark's smug smirk, that told the real story. The pressure from the board and the public was immense. Liam Harrison knew he had to do something drastic. He had to apologize. He scheduled a press conference. His PR team worked around the clock to craft the perfect statement, a delicate balance of contrition and corporate deflection. The press conference was a disaster. Liam stood at a podium flanked by Aurajet banners, looking stiff and uncomfortable. He read from a teleprompter, his voice lacking any genuine emotion. Aurajet Airlines has always been deeply committed to the principles of diversity and inclusion. He began reading the soulless corporate jargon. "We sincerely regret the recent events at JFK, where a misunderstanding at the boarding gate led to a negative customer experience for one of our valued passengers." A misunderstanding. A negative customer experience. The watered-down language was an insult. "An internal review has been completed, and as a result, we have terminated the employment of the 2 individuals involved, as their actions did not align with the high standards of service and respect we expect from our team." He announced mandatory system-wide sensitivity and unconscious bias training for all 80,000 Aurajet employees. And then came the worst part. "While we cannot comment on the specifics of our former client relationships," he said, looking shifty, "we want to personally apologize to Mr. Ryan Mitchell for the inconvenience he experienced. Aurajet prides itself on getting our customers to their destinations, and we failed in that regard. We hope to have the opportunity to welcome him aboard again soon, to show him the true Aurajet experience." In his quiet home office, Ryan Mitchell watched the press conference on his computer, a cup of tea in his hand. He hadn't said a word publicly, letting Aurajet implode under the weight of its own arrogance. But this apology was a new level of offensive. Inconvenience. He hadn't been inconvenienced. He had been profiled, demeaned, and professionally sabotaged. Failed to get him to his destination. They hadn't just made him miss a flight. They had made him question his life's work. Welcome him aboard again. The tone deafness was staggering. It was the clueless offer of a free toaster oven after burning someone's house down. The apology backfired spectacularly. Social media erupted in ridicule. The press eviscerated it. "Orajet apologizes for the inconvenience of racism," one headline blared. "CEO offers free flight to man whose career he nearly derailed mocked another." Liam Harrison thought he was putting out the fire. Instead, he had just poured a tanker truck full of gasoline on it. The apology wasn't an act of contrition, it was a transparent attempt at brand management, and everyone could see right through it. The hole Orajet was in had just gotten infinitely deeper. If Orajet's leadership thought that firing 2 employees and paying a massive settlement would be the end of their nightmare, they were profoundly mistaken. It was only the beginning of the karma cascade, a relentless, brutal chain reaction of consequences that went far beyond anything they could have imagined. The first domino to fall harder than expected was Sarah Jenkins. After being fired, she took to social media to proclaim her innocence, positioning herself as a scapegoat for a corporation protecting its image. "I was just doing my job, and now I'm being destroyed by the liberal media and cancel culture," she wrote on her Facebook page. This act of defiance prompted an amateur internet sleuth, a college student with a passion for social justice, to do a deep dive into her online history. What he found was a cesspool. Years of thinly veiled racist jokes, shared articles from fringe conspiracy sites about minorities, and comments decrying affirmative action. The student compiled it all into a single devastating Twitter thread, complete with screenshots. It went viral within hours. The thread proved that the incident with Ryan Mitchell wasn't an isolated misunderstanding. It was the inevitable result of a prejudiced mindset that Orajet had either failed to identify or chosen to ignore in their hiring practices. The airline was now accused not just of having rogue employees, but of fostering a culture that allowed such prejudice to fester. Orajet So White began trending. The second domino was Mark Thompson. Convinced of his own blamelessness, he hired a lawyer and sued Orajet for wrongful termination. It was a foolish, arrogant move. Orajet's legal team, eager for a win after their recent humiliation, countersued. In the discovery process, they unearthed his abysmal managerial record, a history of complaints against him for bullying sexism, and most damningly, 2 prior formally dismissed complaints from other minority employees about his condescending attitude. He had been a problem waiting to happen. He lost his case, was ordered to pay Orajet's legal fees, and was effectively blacklisted from the airline industry. His career was over, but the most significant consequence came from an unexpected direction. Spurred by the public outcry, other passengers and even former employees of Orajet began to come forward with their own stories of discrimination. A black pilot who was repeatedly passed over for promotion in favor of less experienced white colleagues. A Muslim flight attendant who was disciplined for her hijab. A Latino family that was removed from a flight after a dispute over a seat assignment. A high-profile civil rights attorney, Benjamin Carter, saw the pattern. He began to gather these stories, and within weeks he announced he was filing a massive class-action lawsuit against Orajet Airlines, alleging a systemic and pervasive pattern of racial and religious discrimination. The lawsuit sought not just financial damages, but a court-mandated overhaul of Orajet's hiring training and promotion policies to be overseen by a federal monitor. The Innovate Corp DOS's settlement of $125 million now looked like a bargain. The potential liability from the class action lawsuit was estimated to be north of $500 million. The federal government now took notice. The Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, citing concerns that a discriminatory corporate culture could compromise safety and operational integrity, launched its own formal investigation. This was the corporate death knell. An FAA investigation could lead to massive fines, revocation of routes, and in a worst-case scenario, the grounding of their operating certificate. The brand was now radioactive. Corporate travel accounts, which were the lifeblood of Aurajet's profits, began to cancel their contracts en masse. Why would a company risk having their employees subjected to such treatment? Leisure travelers booked away, choosing competitors like Delta or United, who were opportunistically running ad campaigns highlighting their commitment to diversity. Aurajet's passenger load factor, the percentage of filled seats, plummeted. Planes were flying half empty. Liam Harrison was a ghost haunting his own executive suite. The stock, which had stabilized briefly after the settlement, was now in a catastrophic freefall, trading at a fraction of its value from a month prior. The company was burning through cash at an alarming rate. They were forced to sell off assets, cancel new aircraft orders, and lay off thousands of employees, pilots, flight attendants, mechanics, the very people who had nothing to do with the incident at Gate C-27. The ripple effects of that one moment of prejudice were devastating lives across the country. Finally, the board could take no more. In a short, brutal meeting, they demanded Liam Harrison's resignation. There was no golden parachute, no graceful exit. He was fired for cause, his legacy forever defined not by the years he had spent building the airline, but by the few days he had spent destroying it. Jessica Riley resigned the same day, her career in corporate law in tatters. The karma had been swift, comprehensive, and utterly ruinous. Aurajet Airlines, once a proud titan of the skies, was now a crippled, bankrupt shell of its former self, a textbook example of how corporate arrogance and moral rot can lead to total collapse. 1 year later, the name Aurajet Airlines was a ghost. After a painful bankruptcy proceeding, the company's few remaining viable assets, its landing slots at major airports, and some of its newer aircraft were sold off for pennies on the dollar to its competitors. The elegant swan logo was stripped from the fuselages of planes. The brand and the thousands of jobs it represented ceased to exist. The market had passed its own summary judgment. The fallout for the individuals was just as final. Sarah Jenkins, a pariah online, struggled to find work and ended up in a low-wage retail job, bitter and blaming everyone but herself. Mark Thompson's wrongful termination lawsuit left him bankrupt. Liam Harrison retired in disgrace, his name becoming a cautionary tale in business schools about the cost of failed leadership. And Ryan Mitchell, he was never the same. The incident had changed him in a fundamental way. He returned to work at Sterling Spector and Ross, but the fire for corporate law had gone out. Winning a multi-million-dollar contract dispute for a plastics conglomerate no longer felt important. The polished armor he had spent his life building felt hollow. He had seen how easily it could be stripped away, and he realized he wanted to fight for something more than a client's bottom line. He politely declined the firm's offer to make him the new head of the litigation department. Instead, 6 months after the Aurajet implosion, he resigned his partnership. The move sent shockwaves through the legal community, almost as much as his walking away from the Aurajet case had. Ryan took a significant portion of the wealth he had accumulated and used it to establish the Mitchell Foundation for Corporate Accountability. It was a non-profit public interest law firm with a singular focused mission to represent individuals who had faced discrimination, harassment, or retaliation at the hands of powerful corporations. He hired a small team of bright, hungry young lawyers who believed in the cause, not the billable hour. Their first major case was as a co-counsel alongside Benjamin Carter in the class action lawsuit against the now defunct Aurajet. They didn't get the $500 million verdict. There was no company left to pay it. But they secured a settlement from the bankruptcy estate's insurance policies for $90 million, a fund to be distributed among the hundreds of victims who had come forward. It wasn't just money. It was a vindication. It was a legal record etched in stone of the airline's wrongdoing. Ryan Mitchell didn't give press conferences or seek the spotlight. He found a new kind of satisfaction in the quiet, painstaking work of justice. His office was no longer a sleek corner suite overlooking the city. It was a modest space in a shared building, the walls covered not in expensive art, but in case files and legal research. He had traded his Tom Ford suits for more comfortable practical attire. The Patek Philippe watch now sat in a drawer replaced by a simple functional digital one. He was in his new office late one evening, preparing for a deposition for a young woman fired from a tech company after reporting sexual harassment when his phone rang. It was Elizabeth Warren, his old mentor. "I saw the news about the Aurajet settlement," she said, her voice warm with respect. "Congratulations, Ryan. You got them in the end." Ryan leaned back in his chair, looking out the window at the city lights. "I didn't get them, Elizabeth," he said softly. "They got themselves. I just held up the mirror." There was a pause. "We all miss you here," she said. "The place isn't the same." "I'm not the same," Ryan replied. "What happened that day? It wasn't just about me. It was about every person who has ever been made to feel small, who has been questioned and dismissed because of how they look. Aurajet thought they were just dealing with one troublesome passenger. They didn't understand that they were picking a fight with an idea, the idea that dignity is not a perk of a first-class ticket. It's a right." He ended the call and turned back to his work. There was no champagne, no victory lap, just the quiet, steady click of his keyboard as he prepared to fight for someone else. He had lost a lucrative career, but he had found a purpose. The polished armor was gone for good, and Ryan Mitchell had never felt stronger. The story of Ryan Mitchell and Aurajet Airlines isn't just a story about revenge or karma. It's a powerful reminder of a fundamental truth. Integrity is the most valuable asset any person or company can have. Aurajet's executives thought in terms of dollars and cents, legal exposure, and brand management. They completely failed to understand the human cost of prejudice. They forgot that the person they dismissed was not just a passenger, but a man who had built his entire life on the principle of respect, a respect he had earned, and a respect they denied him at their peril. This story shows that one person armed with their own dignity and a refusal to be devalued can be more powerful than a multi-billion-dollar corporation. What would you have done in Ryan's shoes? Let me know in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, and you believe in the power of standing up for what's right, please hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to the channel for more true life stories where karma delivers the final, undeniable verdict.